Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button. And if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Death Grips. No Love, Deep Web. Death Grips are an American experimental hip-hop group, critical darlings, and an artist I haven't really taken much time to truly explore. I've listened to them a few times, but never truly sat down and dissected their music, so thanks to a request from a fellow YouTuber, I get the pleasure of tackling the band's sophomore album released in 2012, No Love, Deep Web. Much like the Radiohead review, I had a lot of hype going into this. It's another one of my critic core artists that I was excited to see if I enjoyed them at all. So let's not waste any more time, let's just dive in. What are my thoughts on No Love, Deep Web? Let's find out as I review it track by track. Since I'm pretty sure there were no singles, we will just start at the top of the track list with that being Come Up and Get Me, which opens up with almost an asynchronous, throbbing synthetic barrier that suddenly gets much sharper as it's accompanied by some light snaps plus some minor melodic snare tapping, which is all the track dispatches for percussion. Then the album introduces MC Ride, whose delivery, especially up until the bridge, feels much less cohesive and more like subconscious rambling. It still follows a typical verse-chorus-verse structure, but the way Ride is just spewing words off the dome like he's possessed, it's almost off-putting to my pop-adjusted mindset, but I just can't help but nod along with the thumping bass as Ride seems to be rapping about being trapped inside this abandoned 8-story building with unspecified enemies outside, while also dealing with his own internal battle inside his mind, which perfectly matches the more chaotic yet perturbed nature of this instrumental. Very engaging opener. Lil Boy is a gratifying journey of a song. There are so many parts here, each just as instantly sticky and catchy as the last. One minute you get some steady deep bass and a gentle twinkling synth melody, the next there'll be a buzzing synth and then you'll get this segment that sounds like it was inspired by drum and bass. Various elements will disappear and reintroduce themselves, giving the next chorus or verse a new flavor. There isn't a single boring moment in this song. All the while, MC Ride's delivery is just so ear-grabbing, from his more disjointed parts to that instantly sticky refrain that I just cannot get out of my head. This track does definitely have a more crisp melodic side to it that gravitates me to this song a lot more, and I think it's pretty damn great. No Love is the track that basically opened up my eyes and helped me see why the hype behind this group is justified. This is an amazing song. It's dark, it's menacing, it borders on like a horrorcore feeling with the brumous, almost paranormal atmosphere left by the synth dome. The drums clap and pound aggressively, the bass is intimidating in how it looms over the mix as Ride is rapping over this beat with a haunting intensity and almost a fearful cadence, like a lion hunting its prey, as these lyrics are borderline torturous, potentially targeted at another person, but could also be about breaking down a side of him while he's on a drug trip, or hell, even both. Regardless of the lyrics though, this track was such a riveting listen, and even at 5 minutes, it sure didn't feel too long. Love this one. Black Dice is the first relatively tame track on the record, but that's not really saying too much when the track is engulfed in a perpetual, churning synthetic whirlpool. It almost reminds me of a Drain Gang instrumental, which probably isn't the best comparison since I don't think Blade had much music out in 2012, but that's just what I get from it. Aside from that though, the same light tapping of the drums from Lil Boy returns here again as Ride delivers an unapologetic flow, rapping about the fragility of nuclear war from the perspective of someone who can start it at any minute, and highlighting just how dangerous it can be to leave such power in the hands of a wrong person. Really like this one too. World of Dogs is one of my favorite tracks from the album, and it may just be because, much like Black Dice, it's also a, comparatively speaking, tame song in the tracklist. I love the stamping percussion, the fluttering hi-hats, twiddling synth, and guttural bass combination. It makes the instrumental have an amazing grit to it, while not being completely overblown. Ride exudes an incredible dualistic persona across the track, not necessarily in the lyrics, but just in his tone. One moment he'll be doing his signature forceful delivery, the next you'll hear him categorically singing in a pessimistic refrain, which, speaking of that, one of the most hypnotizing things I've experienced in rap music. Something about that monotone refrain just grabs me, as these lyrics seem to hint at how we're all just animals living our day-to-day lives. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and all the trivial things we do are just time wasters, delaying an inexorable death. Certainly a realistic way to look at life, and I adore the song. Lock Your Doors is a bit of a generic break in between all the chaos of the record, and by that I mean this instrumental doesn't really go anywhere crazy. Sure, it's still got a sludgy, crackly atmosphere with dirty bass, slow, doomy percussion, but honestly, out of all the beats, this one just gives me not too much to talk about. It's a very competent instrumental, but just feels a bit milquetoast in comparison to the havoc of the previous tracks. One thing that isn't standard, though, is Ride. I love how he gradually gets more and more unhinged as the song progresses, and even though I do think the hook can be a bit repetitive, the continuous energy administered by Ride makes the song worthwhile. So though, it's definitely not my favorite on the album. Whammy brings us back to an erratic nature familiarized on the record, yet this one manages to find a pretty stable balance. Sure, the drum work is frenetic, the bass ruptures through the mix, the glitchy synths and vocal sample may be off-putting in its repetition, but everything here is so perfectly melded into a steadfast and punchy instrumental that gets my head nodding every single time it comes on. And Ride is definitely the more off-kilter presence here. His delivery is just slightly off the beat to be noticeable, but isn't detestable by any means, especially with this charisma oozing out of every syllable. Really like this track. Hunger Games is the most minimalistic song on the album in terms of instrumental, really only having a frenzied drum pattern, matching bass, and crashing banging synth breaks. Doesn't really give much else though, but much like on Lock Your Doors, Ride kills the spotlight here. His flow, his cadence, his energy, it just captivates. The chorus has the slightest garnish of melody, while the verses and outro are a bit more crazed in terms of delivery, as he raps about his mood swings being so constant and intense, comparing it to a swing set of moving back and forth, which kind of matches with how the tones between the chorus and the verses are. Not a highlight on the album in my opinion, but it's still good. Deep Web, the shortest track on the album at 2 minutes and 18 seconds, opens up with these sweet, glittery synths that kind of lure me in a bit, like, okay, maybe this will be a bit of a different style for the group, but then the bass just shoots in, creating this tremor across the mix, sputtering constantly as Ride gets back to yelling, almost like he's right back on the opener. It reminds you just what the fuck you're listening to. I love the zipping, distorted synth across the track. It's so atmospheric and intense, as these lyrics seem to show the paranoia that can follow from being online. You might always be being watched, and it can definitely be unnerving. Really like this track, and I personally wish it was longer. Stockton is a track I really feel like I should like a lot more, but I'm kind of just okay on it. It's very slow and has a static instrumental with the rattling hi-hat, knocking bass, and the occasional soundbite of an electric current running through the song. Ride doesn't even really go too far in on this track in terms of vocals, aside from some more assertive moments on the chorus. It just kind of feels like a normal song, which is something I was not expecting from this album. Plus, the chorus does get repeated a lot, and with how slow and stagnant the instrumental is, even at the 3 minutes and 17 seconds, it kind of drags a bit. But I still do enjoy the song due to its catchiness, but it's definitely not a favorite. Pop, much like Stockton, doesn't really leave the most lasting impression. I think this one definitely shines a bit more though. I like the perpetually rising, wavy background melody, twinkling synths that sound like majestic shooting stars, all held together by a standard hi-hat and bass. It's a very enjoyable beat, and while it does switch up a few times, it doesn't go anywhere beyond that. Plus, the hook is just kind of mindless repetition and nothing else. Frankly, it's not even really a hook, but at least the verses are pretty enjoyable, so it's not my least favorite on the album, but it's just alright. Bass Rattle Stars Out the Sky begins the rather amazing final leg of the record with this whizzing synthetic blanket across the song with a drum and bass melody. It's a very punchy beat and has just enough fire to properly propel the song and not get tiresome, which it also probably helps that the song is not even 2.5 minutes. Love Ride's melodic presence on the track too. It's not the most crazed thing he's done on the album, but it feels very tasteful and appealing as he raps about, I'm assuming, being on a drug trip to end all drug trips. He's seeing stars falling out of the sky. He thinks he just gouged his eyes out. It's a pretty exhilarating song. And finally, the closer, Artificial Death in the West, the longest track on the record, just a second shy of 6 minutes, and it actually starts out relatively tame with a simple, pop-friendly, wavering synth along with a snare-slapping and whipping bass. But all in all, I like the mellow trot the song seems to chase. It might just be the calmest track on the record, featuring a few breakdowns and Ride's most laid-back delivery on the album. However, the lyrics are anything but, with Ride rapping about the internet and technology being such a driving force in today's society. We're essentially sculpted by the content we consume online, and we start to lose touch with who we actually are in person as a result. Very nice way to end the record. Overall, this Death Grips album was pretty damn great. For a first true exposure to Death Grips music, I wasn't sure what to expect aside from some chaotic, balls-to-the-wall electronic rap, and while that was there were a decent bit of skeletal accessibility with a poppy garnish. I wasn't expecting to hold on to as much of this album as I did. I think my main complaint boils down to just some of the tracks feeling a bit slow and dragging in comparison to the high-octane dynamic moments, especially in the second half. But there was a good amount here, and I'm very excited to inevitably jump into the Death Grips discography. I'm feeling a 7.5 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace!